Kara Ellis didn't expect her worst morning to be interrupted by a millionaire laughing at her dumb joke. But there he was, tall, suit-clad, and laughing so hard he nearly dropped his espresso. "I'm serious," Kara said, brushing a curl from her face as she stood at the pickup counter of the crowded Brooklyn coffee shop. "If someone puts pineapple on my pizza again, I'll file for emotional damages." The man beside her let out a sharp, surprised laugh, deep and genuine, and turned toward her with a grin that made her stomach flip. "That was good," he said, his voice smooth, rich, and painfully charming. "You a lawyer?" "No," she replied, arching a brow. "But I Google things aggressively." He chuckled again, a low sound that made her pulse quicken. She hadn't meant to make anyone laugh. She'd just been venting to the barista after a long shift at the bookstore and a broken washing machine. But this guy, he looked like he belonged in a magazine ad for cologne or luxury watches, not in her orbit. "Ryan Hastings," he said, offering his hand. Kara hesitated, then shook it. "Kara Ellis." That handshake lingered a second too long. She grabbed her coffee, but before she could retreat, he gestured to the empty stool beside him. "You in a rush?" She blinked. "Why?" He shrugged. "You made me laugh. That deserves at least 5 minutes of conversation. I'll even buy you a muffin." Kara stared at him. "Are you always this forward?" "Only when someone talks about pizza lawsuits." Against her better judgment, and probably because his smile made her chest ache, she sat. They talked. About her bookstore job. About the ridiculous things customers asked for. About how she once tried to adopt a cat and got rejected because the cat didn't vibe with her. He laughed again, eyes crinkling. "That's officially the best rejection I've ever heard. And you?" she asked, fidgeting with her sleeve. "What do you do?" He paused. "I work in real estate." That was technically true. He just didn't mention he owned the company, or that his name had been on the cover of Fortune magazine last month. "Sounds boring," she teased. "Painfully," he agreed. When she finally stood to leave, he reached into his wallet. "Here," she frowned. "What's that?" "A gift card to this place, in case you ever want to sue someone over pizza again." She laughed, taking it. "Thanks, and thanks for not being creepy." "Low bar," he said with a wink, "but I try." She left. He watched her go. Ryan didn't know why he couldn't stop smiling. He met models, investors, women wearing $5,000 heels. But Kara, she was wearing a jacket with a missing button and had coffee stains on her sleeve, and she'd made him laugh harder than he had in months. He didn't expect to see her again. But 3 days later, he walked into that same shop, hoping for caffeine and maybe, just maybe, another pineapple lawsuit. And there she was behind the counter this time, wiping down a sticky surface with a focused frown. He smiled. She looked up, eyes widening. "Real estate guy." "Pizza girl," he said back. She laughed, then gestured to the register. "You ordering or just here to cause chaos?" "Both," he said. "Also, I want to use my gift card. I've got legal grievances." She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks turned pink. "You're ridiculous." "Thank you," he said. "I work hard at it." From then on, it became a thing. He'd show up. She'd pretend to be annoyed. They'd talk, joke. Sometimes she'd slide him a free cookie. Sometimes he'd leave her a $5 tip with a post-it that said things like, "For emotional damages." He didn't mention the sleek black car parked out front, or the fact that he lived in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and original Monet paintings, or that his real estate company had just closed a $12 million deal in Manhattan, because Kara looked at him like a person, not a paycheck, and he liked that way more than he thought he would. One afternoon, he walked in right as she was pulling off her apron. "Off early?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "I have a shift at the bookstore in an hour." "Let me drive you," she hesitated. "To my second job." "I promise not to judge your playlist." She bit her lip. "You don't have to, I want to." His car, a sleek black Aston Martin, earned a raised brow from her. "Real estate must be booming," he laughed nervously. "You could say that." She slid in, and they drove through the city with the windows down, music playing and something buzzing in the air between them. At a red light, she turned to him. "You know, I don't even know your last name. Hastings, she blinked. Like, Hastings Developments, he glanced at her, then back at the road. Yeah, she stared. You're Ryan Hastings, he nodded slowly. She sat back, stunned. You're worth like millions? Technically, yes. Why didn't you tell me? He glanced at her, voice quiet. Because I like just being the guy who laughed at your joke. She didn't say anything. He pulled up in front of the bookstore. I'm sorry if that changes things, he said as she unbuckled. Kara turned to him. Her heart was racing. This man who laughed at pineapple jokes and gave her muffin gift cards was a millionaire, and he hadn't once acted like he was better than her. She leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. It doesn't. And then she was gone. Ryan sat there, stunned, and for the first time in a long time, he realized he didn't want to go back to his penthouse alone. He wanted to stay in that car, listening to her talk about cats and coffee and weird customers. He wanted more. He wanted her. The next time Kara saw Ryan, he was standing outside the bookstore just as she was locking up after closing. A light drizzle had started, and the streetlights shimmered against the wet sidewalk. He didn't have an umbrella, just his coat collar raised as he leaned casually against the brick wall. She stopped short, gripping her bag. You stalking me now? Only part-time, he said. I was nearby, thought I'd walk you home. Kara narrowed her eyes. You don't seem like someone who walks anywhere. I do when I've got a reason. She chewed the inside of her cheek, then stepped down the stoop and fell into step beside him. Her shift had been long and her feet ached, but the silence between them was easy, not awkward, not forced. How's the empire? She asked, adjusting the strap of her bag. He glanced over. You mean the soul-sucking machine that eats my sleep, thriving? She laughed lightly. You say that like you didn't build it yourself. I did, but sometimes I wonder if it's building me now. She didn't press. Instead, they walked past shuttered storefronts and honking taxis, the city humming around them. A block later, she paused under a canopy of a closed florist shop. You didn't have to do this. Walk me home, I mean. I know, he said. But I wanted to see you. Kara looked away, heart thudding somewhere in her throat. You always like women who insult your coffee choices and get rejected by cats. Turns out I do. She shook her head, but her lips curved despite herself. They reached her building, a narrow brownstone with cracked stone steps and a buzzer that only worked when kicked twice. She turned on the bottom step, raindrops glinting in her curls. You want to come up? She asked, suddenly unsure. I mean, not for anything weird. I have leftover Thai food and a couch that only sinks a little. He hesitated for half a second. Yeah, I'd like that. Inside, her apartment smelled like sandalwood and old books. Not because she was trying to be poetic, she just knocked over an incense stick last week and hadn't found it yet. The space was small, lived in, and filled with things that didn't match but somehow made sense together. A cracked record player, a leaning stack of novels, a mug with a chipped rim holding pens. Ryan stood in the middle of it, hands in his coat pockets, taking it all in. You live alone? He asked, stepping aside as she kicked off her shoes. Yeah, roommate moved out 2 months ago, said my tea obsession was too intense. Clearly they weren't built for commitment, she grinned, tossing her keys into a bowl. He shrugged off his coat and laid it over the back of a chair. You want help heating anything up? She blinked. You know how to microwave Thai food? I've mastered the art of not exploding containers. It's harder than you'd think. She handed him the container with a raised eyebrow. Be my guest, microwave whisperer. While he navigated the buttons, she curled onto the couch and pulled a blanket over her knees. Watching him in her space felt strange and intimate in a way she hadn't expected. He didn't look out of place, even though everything about him said he should have. He sat beside her a few minutes later, handing her a steaming container and a fork. They ate in comfortable quiet, the kind only possible when two people weren't trying to impress each other. This isn't how I usually spend Thursday nights, he said eventually. Me neither. Usually, I'm yelling at true crime documentaries. He tilted his head. You don't seem like a murder show person. I contain multitudes. He laughed, shaking his head. You're something else, Kara. She looked at him then, the soft light from the floor lamp catching the edge of his jaw. "Why me?" she asked quietly. He set down his container. "What do you mean? You could be anywhere, with anyone, but you're here, with my couch that eats people." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, steady. "Because you don't look at me like I'm a number or a headline. Or a deal, you talk to me like I'm human, you make me forget all the noise." She didn't know what to say to that, so instead she leaned her head against his shoulder, surprising even herself. He didn't move, just shifted slightly so she fit more comfortably against him. They stayed like that until the rain outside turned heavier, drumming softly against the windows. When he left that night, he didn't try to kiss her. He didn't reach for her hand. He just looked at her like she'd unraveled something in him he hadn't known was tangled. The next morning, a delivery van pulled up outside the bookstore just as she arrived for her shift. A man jumped out, holding a flat rectangular package. "Kara Ellis?" he asked. She nodded, confused. He handed her the envelope and left without another word. Inside, she found a hand-drawn map. It wasn't detailed, just a sketch of Brooklyn with 2 X's. One marked the coffee shop, the other marked her building. In the corner, he'd written, "Somewhere between laughter and late-night tie, I got lost." Kara stared at the paper for a long time, her heart doing something strange and unsteady in her chest. She folded the map carefully and slipped it into her bag. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a flirtation anymore, and she wasn't sure she was ready for where it might lead, but she knew she wasn't turning away. Kara stood motionless in the art gallery, her eyes fixed on the wide canvas in front of her. The painting was abstract swirls of deep blues and sharp golds that seemed to fight each other across the surface, but she wasn't really seeing it. She was thinking about Ryan's last words to her the night before. "You make me forget all the noise." The gallery was in Soho, tucked between a boutique that sold hand-stitched leather gloves and a wine bar with no sign. Her friend from the bookstore, Marla, had dragged her there for a cultural reset, claiming Kara spent too much time around paperbacks and needed to experience art that didn't come with a spine. Kara had agreed, but her thoughts kept drifting. She hadn't expected Ryan to send her a map. She hadn't expected to look at it more than once, but she had. She'd stared at the 2 X's for so long she could trace the lines in her sleep. "Earth to Kara," Marla said, nudging her elbow. "You've been staring at that painting for 10 minutes. Are you having a spiritual awakening or just zoning out?" Kara blinked. "A little of both." Marla tilted her head. "You've been different lately. Lighter, maybe. Did you get laid and forget to tell me?" Kara rolled her eyes, but a slow smile tugged at her mouth. "No." "But I met someone." Marla's brows shot up. "Okay, now you're contractually obligated to spill everything." Kara hesitated, then leaned closer. "He's funny, smart, he listens, and he's wildly out of my league." "Oh, come on," Marla said. "You say that about anyone who owns socks without holes." "He's also," Kara paused, "a millionaire." Marla blinked. "Like has a boat Millionaire or owns the dock it's tied to Millionaire." The second one. "Well, damn," Kara laughed under her breath, but there was a strange flutter in her chest. She hadn't told anyone yet, not about who Ryan really was, or how he'd walked her home like it was the most natural thing in the world when everything about them didn't match. Marla's gaze softened. "Does he make you feel good?" Kara nodded. "Yeah, he makes everything feel." "Quieter?" "Then let the man ruin your life in the best way." That night, Kara found herself standing in front of Ryan's building. She'd never been there before. He'd mentioned he lived in Tribeca, but she didn't expect a doorman or the kind of lobby that smelled like citrus and polished stone. She felt suddenly underdressed in her boots and corduroy jacket, but she pressed the buzzer anyway. The elevator opened to a private landing, and before she could second-guess herself, the door swung open. Ryan stood there in black slacks and a slate-gray sweater, barefoot, holding a glass of whiskey. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure I should," she replied, "but I didn't want to overthink it and ruin something before it even started." He stepped aside and she walked past him into the space. It was sleek and minimal, but not cold. Wood floors, soft lighting, books stacked on every surface. A record spun quietly in the corner, some old jazz Kara didn't recognize, but somehow it fit. "I wasn't expecting you tonight," he said, setting his glass down. "But I'm glad you're here," she turned to him. "You really live like this," he smiled. "It's quieter than it looks." She walked over to a shelf, fingers brushing over the spine of an old hardcover. "You read Faulkner?" "I pretend to," she laughed. Then paused. "I keep thinking this is a mistake." He crossed the room slowly. "Why? Because most men like you don't even see women like me. Then maybe I'm not like most men." She looked up at him. "I don't want to be a novelty." "You're not," he said, voice steady. "You're the first thing that's made sense in a long time." She felt something shift inside her. She reached for his hand. He held it like he never wanted to let go. They ended up on the floor beside the fireplace, a bottle of wine between them, legs tangled as they talked about everything that didn't fit into coffee shop conversations. He told her about his father, how he'd left when Ryan was 16, right after the first property deal had fallen through and the bank had nearly taken everything. How Ryan had spent years trying to build something so solid, no one could ever walk away from it again. Kara listened, her fingers tracing the curve of his wrist as he spoke. "You built an empire out of fear," she said gently. He nodded. "And I only realized that after I met you." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You don't have to keep building it alone." He turned toward her, eyes searching hers. "I don't want to." Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glowed through the tall windows, but neither of them noticed. Later, as she slid into the passenger seat of his car, her phone buzzed. A missed call from her landlord. Ryan glanced over. "Everything okay? They're selling the building," she said. "I'll have to move in 60 days. He hesitated. "You can stay here," she blinked. "What? I'm serious, Ryan. I know, and I'm not saying move in tomorrow. I'm saying, don't worry, I'll figure something out." She stared at him. "You always do, don't you?" He didn't answer. He just reached across the console and laced his fingers through hers. In that moment, Kara realized something terrifying and undeniable. She was falling. Fast. And maybe, just maybe, he was too. Kara stood in front of the mirror in her bookstore's tiny employee bathroom, smoothing the collar of her blouse with trembling fingers. It wasn't nerves, not really. It was the weight of everything about to shift. Ryan had called that morning, his voice low, almost hesitant, and asked her to meet him at a private event that evening. A small thing, he'd said. Low-key. Which, coming from him, probably meant champagne towers and a string quartet. She hadn't said yes immediately. But now she was here, wearing the one pair of heels she didn't hate and trying not to overthink how fast everything had become more than she expected. Outside the bookstore, a sleek black SUV idled at the curb, a driver stepping out to open the door for her. She hesitated. It felt strange, being part of something so polished, so deliberate. But she climbed in without a word. The building they arrived at was all glass and steel, with understated security and a lobby so silent it felt like stepping into another world. The elevator opened to a rooftop garden, glowing with soft lanterns and wrapped in the scent of jasmine. Ryan was waiting near the edge, hands in his pockets, city skyline behind him like a painting come to life. For a moment, he didn't see her. He was staring out over the rooftops, lips set in a thoughtful line. "You said this was low-key," Kara said, stepping onto the stone path between planters of flickering candles. He turned, and the tension in his shoulders dropped the second he saw her. "It is," he said. "If you're someone who regularly dines with billionaires and underdressed violinists." She couldn't help it, she laughed. "What is this?" "A fundraiser," he said, "but I'm not here for that." He led her to a quiet corner where a table for two sat beneath a string of golden lights. A waiter appeared without a word and poured wine so pale it looked like starlight. "This doesn't feel real," Kara said quietly. "It is," Ryan said, "but I get why it might not." He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. "Last week, I closed a deal that should have made me feel unstoppable. Instead, I felt empty. Until I walked into that coffee shop again and you made that stupid pineapple joke. She looked at him, her throat tightening. I've built everything to be untouchable, he continued. But when I'm with you, I don't want to be. You make me want to feel all of it. Kara's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know how to live in your world. Then I'll live in yours, he said. The music shifted, something soft and slow drifting through the air. Without asking, he stood and held out his hand. She took it, and he pulled her into a gentle sway beneath the lights. Her head rested against his chest, and for a long moment, nothing existed but the quiet beat of his heart and the way his hand fit perfectly at the small of her back. When they pulled apart, he looked at her like he was memorizing every detail. I want to show you something, he said. They left the rooftop, the car taking them farther downtown. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. When they stopped in front of a narrow building with ivy crawling up the side, she blinked in confusion. This used to be a community arts center, he said, unlocking the door. Shut down 5 years ago. I bought it last year but didn't know what to do with it. They stepped inside. The space was empty but clean, with exposed brick walls and tall windows that let in the moonlight. He turned to her. It's yours, she blinked. What? I had the paperwork drawn up. It'll take a few days to finalize, but I already told my lawyer. You've talked about wanting to run your own place, something that feels like home. This could be that. Her mouth parted, but no words came. I'm not doing this to impress you, he said. I'm doing it because I believe in you. Because when you talk about books, about community, about stories, you light up. And I want to give you a space where you can do that every day. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. People don't just give away buildings. I don't do this for just anyone, he said. I'm doing it for you. She crossed the room slowly, fingers brushing the windowsill, the outline of shelves already forming in her mind. Then she turned and walked straight into his arms. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. His arms tightened around her. You're not alone. They stayed there, wrapped in the echo of that confession, until the streetlights flicked off and the first blush of dawn crept through the windows. A week later, Kara stood behind the counter of her new space, a set of keys in her hand and a clipboard tucked under her arm. The shelves were still bare, but the walls smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Ryan was in the corner, talking with a contractor, sleeves rolled up and clipboard in his hand. He caught her eye and smiled, not the polished grin he wore at board meetings, but the one that was just for her. The one that made her feel like the world tilted slightly in her direction. When he crossed the room, she met him halfway. This is really happening, she said. He kissed her forehead. You made it happen. Outside, people passed by unaware of the tiny miracle taking place inside, but Kara knew. And so did Ryan. He'd laughed at her joke once, not knowing she'd be the woman who would turn his world inside out. Now, she was the woman he'd love for the rest of his life. Kara adjusted the stack of leather-bound journals on the front display table, the smell of fresh wood polish and unopened books still lingering in the air. Outside, the first snow of the season dusted the sidewalk, and through the frosted windows, New York moved slower than usual, muffled and dreamlike under a pale December sky. She glanced up toward the mezzanine where Ryan stood beside a lighting technician, gesturing toward the newly installed reading nook above the floor-to-ceiling window. He'd come straight from a meeting uptown, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, hair slightly wind-blown. He didn't look like a man who'd just left an executive boardroom. He looked like someone who belonged here among stories and soft light and the quiet joy of beginnings. When he made his way down the stairs, she met him at the foot of the display ladder. You didn't have to come back after the meeting, she said, brushing dust from her fingers. I didn't want to miss this, he replied. You're opening tomorrow, Kara, she nodded, nerves tightening in her stomach. The idea of people walking in here and expecting it to be something. It's a lot. Ryan looked around the space, still echoing faintly with the sound of final touch-ups. It already is something. You made it that way. I feel like I should be terrified, she admitted, but I'm not. I think that's what's scaring me. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You're allowed to have something good. You don't have to earn it by suffering." She looked at him, her eyes scanning the faint crease between his brows, the one that only appeared when he was genuinely concerned. "I used to think getting attached to anything was dangerous," she said. "That people like me didn't get things like this, not just the bookstore. You," he reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I used to think building walls made me strong. Turns out I was just lonely behind them." They stood in silence for a moment, the low hum of the heater and the occasional clink of metal tools the only sounds around them. "Come home with me tonight," he said suddenly. She tilted her head. "I thought I already was." He stepped closer. "I mean all the way. Move in." Her breath caught. "Ryan. No pressure. If you're not ready, I'll wait. But I keep imagining waking up and seeing your shoes by the door, your books stacked on the coffee table next to mine. I want to build a life with you, Kara." Not just moments. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked around the shop, the shelves she'd stocked, the corner where her little desk sat, the basket of hand-labeled bookmarks she'd made over coffee at midnight. This place was hers, but so was he. "I don't want to live in borrowed time," she said. "I want real, messy hours." "Then say yes." She nodded, tears pricking behind her eyes. "I'm saying yes." He kissed her right there in the middle of the shop, surrounded by the scent of new pages and pine-scented cleaner, with snow still falling outside and the city holding its breath. "I have something for you," he murmured once they pulled apart. She arched an eyebrow. "Another building," he laughed. "No, smaller." He pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate gold necklace. The pendant was a tiny compass engraved with her initials on the back. "Because you've always known exactly where you were going, even when you thought you were lost." She touched the charm gently, overwhelmed. "I love you," she said, voice unshaking. He smiled, the kind of smile that made the world fall away. "I love you more." The next morning, the door to the shop opened for the first time and people flooded in. Locals, tourists, curious passers-by drawn in by the hand-painted sign over the door, Ellis & Co. Books. Kara greeted every customer with the same warmth she used to reserve for close friends. Ryan stayed quietly in the background, helping carry boxes, restocking shelves, and occasionally slipping her a candy from the stash he'd hidden behind the counter. By evening, the shelves were half empty. A dozen people had joined the new book club, and someone had already asked if she'd consider hosting poetry nights. As she locked the door and turned off the lights, Ryan wrapped his coat around her shoulders and kissed the top of her head. "You did it," he said. "We did." He handed her his key. She took it without hesitation. That night they sat curled together on the couch in his penthouse, a takeout container of curry between them, snow still falling softly outside the glass walls, no suits, no business calls. Just the two of them, wrapped in blankets, her legs tangled with his. "This is the best chapter," she said sleepily. "It's the beginning of the best book," he replied. Years later, the bookstore would expand to a second location. Their home would fill with laughter, mismatched furniture, and eventually the pitter-patter of tiny feet on hardwood floors. But no matter how much changed, every anniversary, he'd give her a new compass pendant, each one engraved with a different memory. And every time she looked at him, even when his temples turned silver and their lives were louder, fuller, she still saw the man who laughed at her pineapple joke and changed everything. They never lost their way, because they'd found home in each other.